I don't know how to follow that. I'm Erin Christian, and I'm very grateful to be here with everyone today, not only to be reading, but to get a nice break from South Georgia weather. This piece was inspired by a headline that I read while I was in graduate school of an elderly man who left his wife on the floor for 10 weeks after she fell, and I just felt compelled to write a short story about it. And it's entitled, God Bless You with Rainbows. I was standing near my porch, watering my azaleas, when George's screen door slammed. He was waving at me, but looking around across the street. I felt a cold stab in my stomach when my eyes met his, and I let the hose drop near the bushes. In all the 7 years that I lived beside him, we'd never so much as said good morning to each other. The most I ever did was nod, he smile. He and his wife, Beth, kept to themselves. George was frantic when I reached his doorway. His chest was rising in shallow little gasps, and he made a keening sound from the back of his throat. Through his white undershirt, it was like watching the rib cage of a mouse flutter. I tried to ask him what was happening, but he just grabbed my elbow and tugged me inside. He dragged me through the living room, and I only had time to see those little red candies in a clear dish near the couch, the hard ones that taste like strawberries with the gooey inside. The shades were pulled and lights off. The wrappers sparkled in the dark. We turned the corner and reached the bathroom. There she was, on her side, and still. Her gray curls were propped on a pillow, and her eyes were screwed tight, like she'd sucked on a lemon just before she died. A Precious Moments figurine sat on the sink behind her, a little girl dressed in a raincoat, holding an umbrella. Its stand said, God bless you with rainbows. George loomed at my right and looked at his slippers. I turned to him and watched him blink back at me. George, you said she's been there since July 8th? I put my hand on his shoulder and he flinched. That's over 10 weeks, George. He didn't respond, only looked down at her and then again at his slippers. We stood there a moment, my hand still resting on his frail frame, and then he whispered, She just stopped breathing, just before I come out to my porch. She weren't unhealthy. His voice was hoarse, reminded me of a light bulb flickering. I took my hand from his shoulder and inched away from the bathroom. I leaned against the wall and grasped the cell phone in my pocket. George, why didn't you ask me to come help you pick her up? His blinking eyes were now fixed solely on her, and he ran a hand across his bald and greasy scalp. She fell. She didn't want no help. When anyone called, we just said she was sick and couldn't take no visitors. I closed my eyes. Christ. His voice began to tremble, crack. His cheeks, neck, and forehead flushed. You've got to know, William. You've got to know I took good care of her. Bathed her, fed her, gave her medicines. He gripped my elbow and brought his nose to mine. His eyes danced with water. You got to know I did. The cold in my stomach grew wings. Over a week ago, I'd heard from the chatty Cathy next door, Doreen, that Beth was off visiting their daughter. I pressed the back of my head into the wall. He kept his grip on my elbow, tugging. As his grip tightened, mine closed around my phone, and I could feel it slick and cool in my palm. Pulling away, I opened it to call for help. George stayed by the bathroom door, cradling that little figurine in his hands like an injured bird.